Hello, welcome to Unit 4 of the Teaching Statistics through Inferential Reasoning MOOC for Educators. In this unit, we're going to be focusing on tasks that have students consider competing models. So, opportunities for inferential reasoning that include competing model scenarios have students consider whether one model or another might be more appropriate to describe or characterize a population or a process. These types of tasks are really great opportunities to get students involved in informal hypothesis testing and then building up to more formal techniques. So essentially, students need to think about an initial or assumed model that they believe to be true. And then they are looking at data to see if that data provides evidence that they can reasonably say that they think that that model might be appropriate, or does the evidence suggest that a different model may seem to be more appropriate? So notice the uncertain language that I used there. When we're dealing with competing models and we're trying to say whether one model is better than another, we need to make those claims using language that give a hint at the uncertainty in those decisions. Tasks that involve competing models are similar to those that involve comparing groups. However, there are some key differences. In a comparing group task, we're often given data and we have data about different groups and we're asked to compare them to see if there's any differences or similarities. But in a competing model situation, we really need to be thinking about is there a repeated process that could be used to generate the data that we're observing? And this can help us decide which model might be the most appropriate. So let me give you some examples. One example is to think about a die roll and whether or not a die is fair. So the initial assumption is that the die is fair, and we want to repeatedly roll the die to see if we can gather enough evidence to support that assumption that the die seems to be fair. However, we might see evidence that suggests that the die produces biased results, and then we might come up with a different model to explain what the die actually does. Another example is thinking about comparing two groups that maybe underwent different treatments. And so in that situation, an initial model or your null model is that there's no difference between results we would see between these two different treatments. Well, we want to imagine that if this was repeatedly done, particularly if there was reassignment to different treatment groups, would we see the same results, depending on which group a person was assigned to? So thinking about this, our initial or null model is that there is no difference, and we're looking for evidence to suggest that that model is either that we can support that it might be true, or is there enough evidence to suggest that there really is a difference between these two treatment groups? And at the core of all of this, we are building upon this idea of sampling variability and the foundation about how a particular statistical measure is distributed in a sampling distribution. In the Engage with Essentials, you'll see our expert panel discussing some of their favorite tasks that they use related to competing models. And in one piece of our discussion, we really think about the importance between using hands-on approaches and simulation-based approaches. In the Learn from Practice, you'll hear from some master teachers about some of their favorite tasks to promote inferential reasoning. And in the classroom, you'll get a peek at an animated video that was developed based on the work of real students for my own research using one of my favorite competing models task. In this task, students are asked to think about whether a die company produces fair die or not. In the Explore and Discuss, you'll have a chance to engage with a competing models task and to discuss that with your colleagues. Of course, in the Extend Your Learning, you're going to find many more resources that you can use in your practice, and I hope that you'll also engage with your colleagues in the Discuss with Colleagues forum. I hope that you are ready to learn how to use competing models tasks in your practice and engage in Unit 4.